Hi, welcome to 40 Rules of Love by Elif Shafak. Well, it's actually me, Malik here. We're going to do a workshop and kind of have a talk about some of the rules and bring them together and see what we can come up with in terms of living our life by the 40 rules and trying to pull some meta themes together from that. So hello, Dawn. I can see that Dawn's here. So we'll just hang around for maybe a minute or two, see if some other guys pop in. I can see some other people logging on. So just see how that goes. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Is that fine? Can you see the screen with this 40 Rules of Love picture? And can you hear me okay? Can you just shout out and let me know that, please? Otherwise, I could be talking to myself here. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll give it just a couple of more minutes if that's okay, guys, and then we'll get started with these 40 Rules of Love. I'll change the picture into something a little bit more that you've seen before. If you've been in the Facebook group, then you'll have come across these 40 rules here, which is not 40 yet, but you know, as many as I can fit on the screen there. So we'll be covering not so much going through the 40 rules, you know, like just talking to them and kind of like, you know, just, you know, each rule as it is like that. However, what we'll kind of do is we'll kind of try and pull some meta themes, what I like to call meta themes, together and see how that goes. Okay, so great stuff. So we get a couple more people coming into the room here. We've yeah, I can catch you, Elaine. Yeah, with this interesting flashing button here. Let me just see what that happens. Hello, Elaine. Can you hear me? Just a second, Dawn. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you just like, you know, type a little chat message there to make sure that I am speaking to you guys? Okay. Seem to be a little bit of a problem there. No. Okay, I'm going to carry on. Just if you're okay, if you're hearing me okay, then just drop a little note in there. Yes and yes. Thanks very much, Dawn. Okay, great stuff. So I know that you're hearing me anyway. So let's get started with this workshop then. What I want to do is I've got a little bit of an agenda type thing here. So we'll go through a bit of an introduction, which I've semi-little done already. And then what we'll talk about is the levels of understanding. We'll go through something like that. And then the meta themes, which I've kind of mentioned, is what we're going to do is bring some of the topics from the rules together in a kind of meta way, rather than going through each of the rules and kind of talking about and discussing it, which would take quite a long time. What we'll bring together is some meta themes from that, and then kind of see how that fits in rather than going through each of the rules. And then I actually want to look at the 40 Rules of Love book itself as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that and some of the characters in there and some of the stories in there, and see what we can learn from the book as well. So I'm going to be a little bit critical about the book as well, because, you know, we've kind of seen all the rules of love and that's really fantastic, but let's look at some of the characters within the book as well and see how they relate to the 40 rules of love which the book talks about. So we'll look at that as well. So just a little bit of a warning there: if you've not read the book, then there'll be some spoilers within that, so be aware of that in that 40 rules of love section. And then we'll kind of go into this lover of love kind of thing and look at ourselves and how we can kind of implement some of these rules in our lives and see how we can practice that. And we'll do a bit of a Q&A. So if you have any questions, by the way, just type them in there in the box and we'll get to them at some point. So please feel free to ask any questions you like about anything to do with the book, with the rules, with what we're talking about here. Just type them in there, and that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's a kind of, you know, agenda for this workshop, or slash kind of exploration of the 40 rules. Okay, so let's move on then. Introduction, here we go. So I've just mentioned, you know, if you've got any questions, just keep, you know, type them in there into the chat box there, and we'll kind of like get through those as and when they become appropriate to that. So please feel free to do that at any time, and I'll try and get to answer them. A little bit about myself. My name's Malik. I mean, you've probably seen me on Facebook. So I kind of like came to this Sufism quite early because my parents were interested in Sufism from a religious perspective. So they kind of brought me up with that, with kind of notion of Sufism. But I'm more of a kind of like a heart-centered person myself. I'm come at it from a lovely, just when you need it, an ice cream one. Fantastic. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. So yeah, so from a personal point of view, what happened with me is that I was brought up with a notion of Sufism without actually knowing what it was about and stuff. And then from my own personal practice, I practice more like a heart-centered view of life and stuff like that. And as I kind of learned more about Sufism later on in life, I found that a lot of that gelled and melded quite nicely with being heart-centered. So I think a lot of that, you know, is quite happily mixes together. Although from a personal point of view, there are some kind of areas where I think, you know, I do differ from what might be traditionally called Sufism and like Sufis. So, and I might have like some small objection with one or two of the rules as well, as we'll see. And if you actually, you know, have any objection to those, please type them in the comment box there, and we'll have a look at that as well. So I kind of consider myself really to be some kind of an amateur Sufi rather than a, you know, like a serious practitioner of it. The next thing I want to move on to here is like kind of levels of understanding, if you like, because, you know, sometimes you get mixed up with this idea of like, you know, using the word love. People are sometimes frightened as they're using the word love, actually. Then you've got spirit and God, and then, you know, kind of the religious thing comes in and gets a bit mixed up with that. So, you know, people have like kind of an aversion to the word God, and more happy to use the word spirit or universe or nature or heart. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you to consider is like, do you think of those things as meaning the same? You know, is love, spirit, God, universe, nature, the heart, you know, are those kind of all the same for you, or are they, you know, kind of different things? Do you think of them as differently? Because I think and feel about the rules as we've kind of seen within the 40 rules of love is that the word love there can be kind of, you know, changed, and you can fit the word spirit in there if you like, or fit the word God, you know, or universe or nature. And in fact, as we kind of like have gone through the 40 rules over the last few days or the last month or so on the Facebook group at least, and if you've read the book, then what you kind of find is that the rules themselves are, you know, interchangeably use the word spirit or universe or nature or heart or God. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, transmuting and putting into place some other word, you know, if it's like 40 rules of spirit or 40 rules of the universe, if you like, you know, I think would work as well. And 40 rules of love is quite a capturing title, so I think we can give away with that. So the other thing I'd like to say, and even within the rules itself, rule number 25 says there are 4 levels of insight. So one of the things that we have to consider when we're coming to these 40 rules is like, at what level of insight are we? You know, are we at the first level where we're kind of just like kind of seeing it from the outside, so to speak, or are we moving through the depths of this insight to the final level of the 4, which is where it's something that you can't even talk about and speak about, you know, where you can't communicate it. It's something that's just inside of you, which wouldn't be very good for this workshop because, you know, it'd be silence, right? So, you know, that's another kind of understanding that we have to kind of like appreciate, that you know, that these levels, and as we kind of explore the 40 rules more and more, then, you know, we'll go through these levels ourselves as well, perhaps with each rule and perhaps with the rules as a whole. So that's an interesting kind of aspect to come across. So it's not that you can read a rule and get everything that you can from it. I think that the rules will mean different things to you in different times of your life and in different situations as well. And I think that depth of it will grow as you explore and kind of think about and feel about the rules as you're going through your life. The other thing, one of the other rules, number 29, kind of mentions that, you know, the universe is composed of 40 different levels, you know. And so another thing to kind of appreciate from your perspective and from my perspective as well is that as you're kind of studying these rules and like kind of applying them to your life or attempting to apply them to your life, that there's these 40 different levels. So, you know, whatever level you're on, if you can actually measure that level in some way, don't be disheartened if like some of the rules don't make sense, because, you know, that's at earlier levels, perhaps they don't make sense. And as you go deeper into them and as you experience them and as you kind of see that your life in some ways and some aspects of your life start to relate to these rules, then you might find that actually, you know, that will bring the understanding, you know. So I think levels of understanding has like kind of different approaches in terms of looking at these 40 rules. You know, is it kind of like the understanding of actually the rule itself? Is it that, you know, the understanding that that rule gives you in a particular life situation? So there's those kind of aspects as well to consider. And for me, you know, I kind of see myself as not really knowing much at all, which is actually something that I wanted to mention in the introduction and say that, you know, I'm kind of an amateur. Even with these 40 rules, I only came across the 40 rules about 3 months ago, early May, from when this recording was made. And so, although I kind of knew quite a bit about Sufism and I knew quite a bit about being heart-centered, the rules themselves I only came across 3 or so months ago. So I'm fairly new to them as well. So please, you know, there's a saying, I think, that, you know, any mistakes that I make here are mine, and any kind of enlightened kind of conversations or quotes that I make have come from somewhere else, you know, have come from spirit, from love, from God, from the universe, whatever. So, but any mistakes are definitely mine. So let's move on. So the next thing I want to talk about here is, if I can move this forward. So we looked at this notion of meta themes. And so what I want to do is pull from the 40 rules, sort of these meta themes, if you like, and I'm kind of worded them there on that slide. So the kind of uniqueness, patience, and the notion of a journey, change, pain is quite often a word that is used within the 40 rules, and we'll look at that, and the universe, love, and lover. So those are the kind of, you know, rather, as I said, rather than going through each of the rules and kind of discussing them, which would take, you know, quite a long time, what I've tried to do is pull some themes together from the rules and see how we can work with that, if that makes sense. So that's a kind of overview slide there of all of the themes. We'll go through each of those individual ones and pull out little bits of the rules and see how they work with those. Okay, great. So let's start with love then. You know, one of the rules number 24 says, every time you fall in love, you ascend to heaven. I think that's quite, you know, quite an apt way of talking about it in terms of falling in love and ascending to heaven. That feeling of, you know, everything is fine, everything is great, and everything is going your way. So I think that's quite an apt way to consider it, because if we kind of have some notion of heaven, that's what heaven's about for us, isn't it? Is where things are, you know, going our way, things are great, that kind of internal fire that burns inside of us, that internal joy that comes alive when we're falling in love. And one of the things I want to mention, kind of in terms of the word love itself and how it's kind of seen as within the 40 rules, because what kind of tends to happen is that we kind of see love as the notion of loving somebody else, and like, you know, your partner, your wife, husband, or, you know, your lover in that sense, and that projection of love outside, and that, you know, coming inside to you as well. And we look at kind of the word love, and often we see it from that aspect. And what from the rules point of view, it's mostly that it's saying it's love pointing inwards. You know, it's kind of love of God or love of the spirit or love of the universe, but that love is an internal aspect. It's pointing towards yourself. So when it says, like, you know, every time you fall in love, it's kind of like one of the aspects that it's kind of talking about is like every time you fall in love with yourself. Okay, so, and then bringing that to an external world, it's falling in love with yourself, and through yourself falling in love with the world and perhaps people in the world and perhaps individuals in the world. So I think that is an interesting kind of aspect to bring into the notion of love, if you like, from a point of view of the 40 rules. And that's an important one to me, because sometimes when I'm working in terms of a heart-centered point of view, is that love is kind of talked of and thought of as being love from the love to somebody outside of you, you know, so it's loving your partner or finding love in the world and finding somebody to love in the world and somebody that loves you, and from that aspect. But from, I think from the 40 rules point of view, much of the love, and in terms of Rumi's poetry, you know, because Rumi is the guy who kind of like was involved in these 40 rules, talks about that love as being pointing at yourself. It's love of God, if you like, and then God is being inside of yourself. And even when it's seen outside of yourself as God, like being in the universe, then it's kind of, you know, generically outside. It's not specifically one person. And, you know, I'm moving on to the next quote here from rule number 5, when in love, language becomes obsolete. So I'm kind of laughing because I'm using language to describe these things. And yet, you know, that quote quite clearly says that when you're in love, language becomes obsolete. And, you know, it kind of reflects back to one of them levels of insight, if you like, you know, the 4th level where language becomes obsolete in that sense as well. So I think, you know, one of the things that, if you have hopefully fallen in love at some point, is that, you know, it's indescribable. You can't describe it. And, you know, the poets and, you know, from all of time have tried to describe that and put it into words, that, you know, that notion of love. And here we are with Shams in his rule number 5 saying that, you know, when you're in love, the language becomes obsolete. You know, it's okay not to be able to describe it. It's okay not to be able to say it. Perhaps it's a kind of a doing thing and a feeling thing, you know, and a kind of sense of connection thing. So it's all of those mixed up that can't be put into words. One of the things that I really love, and quote number 4, which says that, you know, love says, take the plunge, you know, have the courage, go ahead, take a chance. You know, when we start to think about things, we start to be concerned about things and going, you know, is this working? Is this gonna, you know, work out? You know, what, bringing your past history to perhaps a relationship or to some kind of aspect of your life that you're going to, you know, potentially not taking a step towards. And kind of love says, go for it, you know, take that plunge, and, you know, just get out there and do it. And it's a really hard thing to do, and I appreciate it myself that it's a really hard thing to do, because often, you know, one of the greatest pains in our life that we do suffer from is from aspects where we've kind of opened ourselves up to love, and we've suffered through pain. So that's a really kind of hard aspect to deal with that. And, you know, within the 40 rules, it talks about, you know, love and pain as well. So we can appreciate that love and pain when we look at it from that aspect. But again, just to flip back to what I was talking about earlier and the notion of love, because it kind of like, from a one point of view, it's talking about loving yourself. So even when you're loving yourself, take that plunge into loving yourself, you know, be self-accepting in one sense, you know, love who you are and love that person inside of you. I think that is an important aspect of taking this plunge as well. So it's not only taking a plunge in kind of loving somebody else, it's taking a plunge in loving yourself. So that's an interesting aspect of that. I think there's a lot to say there is in that quote number 15, where it says there is no wisdom without love. I think that's an important kind of aspect of wisdom and love, because often we kind of think of wisdom as a kind of experiential thinking thing or a feeling thing, you know, and from experience comes wisdom and so on. Often from experience doesn't come wisdom. From experience comes like, oh, okay, I'll do it again, you know, I'll do the same, make the same mistake again, you know. Perhaps that is a part of love as well. So that, you know, to again, we'll look at it later on in terms of love reducing itself into rubble, which is another one of the quotes. But I think there's a lot to say in that notion of, you know, that without love there is no wisdom, and definitely with love, you know, comes wisdom. Because again, you know, if you're taking the plunge, you're having the experience, and that experience will bring hopefully wisdom with it as well. So that's an important one. Quote number 16, I think, is again is an important one for us, is because only love will purify your heart. So it's that kind of risking, that kind of taking the plunge and loving that kind of aspect, loving ourselves, I think in particular as well, where this kind of quote is pointing to, this rule is pointing to, is just that loving ourselves will purify our hearts, you know. I think, and then going through ourselves, I said, you know, there's a kind of saying that you can only give what you have. So if you love yourself, and then from that perspective, then you can bring love to other people in your life as well. I think one of the things about purifying your heart is definitely is that of loving yourself and taking care of yourself and being with yourself. And one of the things we'll look at later on is solitude, which is kind of an aspect of that being with yourself and experiencing yourself, in particular listening to yourself, you know, finding that silent space to be able to listen to your own heart and listen to what it's asking you to do, and then taking the courage to take that plunge. So that's kind of love, you know, encapsulation of love from the 40 rules. Let's move on. I think uniqueness is a very important aspect of the heart. I mean, so as mentioned before, that I come from a heart-centered point of view, and one of the kind of features of the heart is our uniqueness. And I was really delighted when I was reading through the rules to find that, you know, it agrees with me, you know, or I agree with it, you know, that we are each created different and unique. You know, so one of the things that we kind of try to do is, you know, kind of be like other people, or get other people to be like us, and find people that are like us, so that we can kind of, you know, become this sameness of things. And yet rule number 20 says that, you know, God created us all differently, you know, so we have this difference between us, so we are unique, and the celebration of that uniqueness, you know. So one of the things again about love and self-love, if you like, is that notion of finding the unique parts of you. What is unique about you? And if you can't find any unique parts of you, then create some, you know, go in there, go into your heart and discover those unique parts of you, and then celebrate those, you know, celebrate those. And then from that, you can look at other people and celebrate their uniquenesses as well, rather than, you know, trying to, you know, bring in and merge people into samenesses of things, you know. And so rule number 20 is very appropriate to that. It's, you know, God created us different and unique. And so, you know, let's look at and celebrate that uniqueness, celebrate God's creation in the world by looking at that uniqueness, which is rule number 23. A human being has a unique place among God's creations, okay? So God has, from a point of view, whatever you think God is, you know, the universe, nature, whatever, you know, not only we individually unique, but we as a species are unique as well. And that's an important consideration, I think. So, I mean, rule number 20, again, disrespecting the differences between, you know, us and the thoughts that other people have and stuff like that. It's kind of like disrespecting nature or the universe or God's holy scheme, is what rule number 20 is talking about there. And again, we've just kind of gone through that in quite some detail, in that, you know, disrespecting the notion that people are different. You know, it's like we shout to the world, be like me, or we look at the world and kind of like try to change ourselves so that we are like other people. You know, that's quite a big thing in society these days, how we're trying to, you know, either change people in the world to be like us, or we're trying to change ourselves to be like them, rather than, you know, respecting that difference in uniqueness, which is what rule number 20 is all about. And so we go on to rule number 15, which tells us that this is a really difficult thing. You know, one of the things that I really kind of like about the rules is that it gives us these warning signs. You know, you're driving down the highway, the motorway, and you get this sign saying, you know, there's a traffic jam ahead, so you're going to be late, and so expect these things. And so when you then come across that traffic jam, then it's not a surprise, and it's something that you've expected, and perhaps something that you can anticipate and turn off before you get to it. And I think that's one of the things that we have to look for in these rules as well, is these kind of like, oh yeah, that's giving me a warning. It's saying that, you know, it's really difficult to love our fellow human beings, you know, with all their perfections. Ah, okay. So I kind of like understand that. How can I change some of the things that I do before I approach other human beings so that I can, you know, remember not to, you know, kind of like judge them and see their defects. You know, perhaps I can go out into the world, and before I set off to work or before I set off to meeting, I can consider like, what are the 10 things that I really like about this person that I'm going to meet, rather than the kind of defects and imperfections that these people that are in the meeting might have. So, you know, that's kind of a warning sign that's saying, hey, you know what, these things are hard, right? So when you find it hard, don't be surprised, because that's another part of these rules that I really like, and the way that they kind of present them. And one of the things that you can pull out from them is to say, okay, this is a warning. It's telling me that this is going to be really hard. So when it is really hard, then, you know, I shouldn't beat myself up about it, about not being able to kind of follow that rule, because I've already been told it's hard, and now I'm kind of experiencing the fact that it's hard. And perhaps I can preempt. And one of the things we look at later on in this workshop is how can we like kind of preempt this thing so that we can come to a place, come to a meeting with other people, with people in the world, and bring with it some of these rules or some of the aspects from these rules beforehand, so that we don't see the imperfections and defects, and we see the perfect things and the kind of things that are good within people. Okay, so finally, for this unique section here, I want to look at God deals with us separately. Okay, so, you know, we kind of get this notion of like God kind of like this thing, and he can't really kind of, you know, focus on me. He must be focusing on the planet, if we kind of believe in God and so on. But, you know, from a point of view of the universe or God or nature, whichever word you want to use, right, it's infinitely powerful and infinitely abundant, and can, you know, to the nth degree deal with our lives in an individual way. And we've kind of like seen where one of the rules where it talks about, you know, God's penmanship and how he kind of like, you know, deals with us in an individualistic way, and each of our stories is like an individual story that God writes and God spends time on. So, you know, again, whether you want to use the word God, the universe, you know, nature, whatever word you want to put in there, it kind of writes that individually for us. You know, it's not a collective story. It's each story is a biography. I feel that what that quote is saying is that, you know, an individual biography is written, you know, by God or the universe or whatever you want to call that. That's like kind of our uniqueness in the world. And I really personally, again, you know, go out in the world and try to be unique, you know, say, hey, how can I do that in a unique way? How can I do that in a different way? And, you know, when I see in other people, appreciate it, clap and applaud and appreciate the uniqueness in the world, rather than, you know, kind of like being disgruntled with that kind of thing. Okay, so that's uniqueness. Let's move on. This is a lesson, patience. This is a lesson that I get taught again and again and again, and then I fail to learn it, and then I get taught it again and again. And often I do enter the neighborhood of despair, as quote number 7 sort of tells us not to do, you know, not to enter that neighborhood of despair, because there's always another door, there's always hope. And for me, this has been, you know, I'm one of those people that kind of rushes around and runs around and tries to get, you know, 50 things done in a day. And patience is a lesson that's continuously drummed into me. So when I saw that within one of the quotes, one of the rules, it made me kind of laugh out loud. And I still do whenever I come across that patience rule, it's because it's one that I work on a daily basis. And I have to say, from a personal point of view, I've got better at it. And other people that kind of know me, they've kind of said, you know what, you're getting good with this patience kind of aspect. And one of the things that I like about the rule number 8, because it doesn't talk about patience as being, you know, something that you just kind of do and excuse me, just hang around and not do anything. Because what it kind of says in rule number 8 is that, you know, patience is needed because everything doesn't happen in the same moment. You know, it takes time for the crescent moon to become full, says rule number 8. And that to me really kind of like hit the nail on the head for me in terms of patience, is because it wasn't like patience that I wasn't doing anything. It's like the patience of the waiting for the cake to be baked. You know, you can't do anything. You can't make it bake faster. You just have to wait for it to be and be patient for it. And that, I think, you know, rule number 8, you know, time is needed for the crescent moon to become full. I think it's a beautiful rule for me, because it kind of says, hey, you know what, things are happening. You can't see them. You can't look into the cooker and see things are happening, but things are happening, and, you know, time is needed for that to, you know, that to work its way into your life and through your life. So it's an important aspect of that. Rule number 30 talks about, you know, even when a Sufi is unjustly accused, attacked, and condemned from all sides, a Sufi patiently endures. You know, and again, that's like kind of this notion of, you know, being patient with the people in the world around you, you know, even when they're kind of throwing stuff at you and they're kind of chucking stuff at you. It's about taking that step. And a lot of it, and we'll look at this again later on in how we implement the 40 rules in our life, or some of the rules in our life, is just that we need to create this gap between us and the world, so that, you know, when the world does something to us, you know, like unjustly accuses us or attacks us in some way, then we have to kind of have that bit of patience in there to look at the situation and see whether it's actually is what it is. And in one of the other rules is about that, having that patience and like understanding that what somebody does isn't necessarily something to do with you. Okay, most of the time it's something to do with them, but we can only figure that out, and we can only see it if we have that little bit of patience between what's happening to us and what we do in response to that. And I think some of rule 30, that's where it's kind of talking about, is that a Sufi patiently endures. Okay, so, and rule number 7 again is a really hopeful rule, in that, you know, it talks about a Sufi being thankful for what he's been given, but he's also thankful for what he's been denied. Because, you know, we kind of have this rational, reasonable view of the world, and when we look at the world with this ration and reason, we can see that, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and we can reason it. Even though we haven't traveled step 3, 4, we can reason that that is the way that the road is going. But that becomes a problem, and that's what rule 7, I think, is addressing in that sense, is that you don't know what step 3 and what step 4 is. You only think that you know where it would be. Perhaps it could have been a lot worse than where you are at the moment. So that's what rule 7 says to me. It says is be grateful for what you've got, and be grateful for what you've been denied as well, because, you know, who knows, that whatever you've been denied actually might not have been good for you, but you can't see it from your current perspective. Okay, and then because you don't travel that down that road, because it's obviously been denied, you can't see it from that perspective either. So, you know, this kind of rational, reasonable view of being able to kind of almost see the future is something that is kind of very, you know, it's very impossible to do. You can't see it. You know, all roads might turn ill. You know, any road might turn ill. So I think, you know, to be thankful of what you've been denied is saying something about that as well. And rule number 7 quite aptly, I think, kind of addresses that notion of, you know, okay, let me be thankful for the things that I've got, and, you know, thank you for not giving me those other things. And sometimes, you know, later on, I find that myself, and hopefully perhaps you've done as well, in the sense that, you know, later on in time, you've kind of seen and think, thank God I didn't go that way, you know, thank God that person didn't enter my life in a serious way or something, you know, and, you know, the universe, or again, God, whatever, you feel that has brought that, you know, kind of your attention to your attention, and said, hey, you know what, you know how I didn't let you, denied that path to you, look how that turned out, you know. So I think sometimes we get that reflected back to us from the universe. It's good. One of the other things, I think, rule number 6 talks about solitude, and we kind of mentioned it before. It's like solitude is better for us, and, you know, it's kind of a lot, you know, being alone without feeling lonely. because I feel that sometimes people that I've worked with in terms of my coaching business is that people kind of like, think that, being alone and lonely is solitude. It's not. Solitude is very different. And I think one of the aspects, we talked about, listening to your heart and finding that silence to be able to listen to your heart so that you can kind of know what your heart wants and go out there and do it. Yeah. And I think solitude is one of those things that allows you to do that, is to kind of find a space on your own and be able to be comfortable on your own. I think one of the keys of the rules and Sufism is that being comfortable on your own without feeling lonely, without this notion of feeling loneliness. And we'll look at kind of this feeling of loneliness later on as well when we look at pain. I think when we look at the meta theme, if you like, of pain. Well, that's patience. Very important one, very hard one for me. I'm still very much at the beginning stage of the patience journey. Absolutely. Okay, so one of the aspects that comes across in a lot of the rules is this notion that we're on a journey, and one of the rules, rule number 9, says, be sure to make every journey a journey within. Okay, and I think for me, what that kind of means is, rather than, every journey being a journey within, I think whatever journey you're on, look at the aspects of it that take you within. Okay, or try to kind of, add some depth to it so that it takes you into a journey within as well as a journey to whatever it's taking. So, you might have goals in life, you might have, a relationship or any aspect of your life, a health aspect of your life, whatever it is. You're kind of in a particular place now, and you're on a journey to a particular place that you want to be, more healthier, more happier in your relationship, whatever that is, right? So what that rule is saying is that not only look at it from a point of view of that, I'm pursuing this goal of, making a lot of money or whatever, but also turn that journey as a journey within as well. So it's a journey to some destination, but it's a journey inside as well. And one of the ways to do that, again, we're going back to loving the heart, is to listen to your heart and ask it what it wants, And so when you start to play a song from your heart in the journey that you're on, then I think, that's quite aptly follows that rule, be sure to make a journey within, And one of the other aspects, again, is kind of this version of quest, or this notion of a quest. The quest for love changes us, and we'll look at change in a moment. But in terms of, like, again, as a journey, a quest, okay, a quest is a journey. Okay, so what that again is saying is, I think it's a warning sign. Okay, this is a warning. If you go on a quest for love, it will change you, right? So when it starts to change you, don't be surprised, okay, because this is a normal thing. It's an expected thing. So, and that's, again, I really do want to kind of like, bash home this notion of that these rules give us these kind of warning signs. So when you kind of you do something, or you kind of something happens in your life and you see that it's applicable to this rule, then also look at to change, right? Then I shouldn't resist that change because it's an aspect of what I'm about. Okay, so it's kind of these nice little warning signs that we get to say, whatever you're doing here, watch out, because it's going to be hard, or it's going to change you. So wherever it is, be sure to appreciate that, and bring tools with you to deal with that, because that's another aspect of like having these warnings. Okay, you're sitting in your house, wherever you're sat now, and there's this notion, okay, you know what, I'm going to go on this quest for love. This rule says that it's going to change me. So let me get some things out of my toolbox, when I go on this quest, so that I can anticipate that and, deal with the changes that happen. So rule number 23 then, again, talks us about this being a delegate on earth of God. The universe has chosen you. And you kind of like, one of the things that I sometimes come across is like, well, it's just chosen me. Obviously, there's like 7 billion people on the planet, and surely it's chosen them. But from an individual point of view, which is what this is talking about, it's talking about, your heart, your soul, your spirit, your love, So from that point of view, you are, a delegate of God. God designed you that way, to come into this world and to do something, whatever that is. And again, how do you find that? Listen to your heart. You know, kind of like thinking, well, how do I listen to my heart, right? But we'll get to that as well. You know, we'll get to that in time in this workshop. So don't worry about that for the minute. But again, it's like, you know, what am I here to do? You know, I'm here to listen to my heart, find out what that is, and then do that. And the rules, again, they give you all of these kind of like hints and tips, if you like, of how to deal with the world. And that dealing with the world is a part of being a delegate as well. You know, that's part of God's design, or the universe's design, to be a delegate on earth. And the thing with it is what I kind of like think of is that what these rules give you is an easy path in life. Now, it's also a hard path in life, but the reason why it's a hard path in life is because we've been brought up in this really strange way of not like kind of recognizing that we have a heart and we have a spirit, and love is the kind of like be all and end all of things, particularly loving yourself, you know, because we have been taught that loving other people is a be all and end all, because every single song in the charts sings about that, loving somebody else and the pain of loving somebody else and all that kind of stuff. But from a point of view of love and the 40 rules, it's about yourself, it's about loving yourself. So from that sense of view, then, you know, getting into there and finding out what's in there and then living that is a part of, you know, you being God's delegate on earth. So we'll look at that God's delegate on earth in a later kind of theme as well. So rule number 19, I think is a really important one. Again, a warning: fret not where the road will take you. Instead, concentrate on the first step. And that kind of like, to me, is a very important one, because for many of us, we just won't take that first step. You know, we will just like stand there and deliberate and think about it and consider and consider and consider. And, you know, what that is telling us, you know, is don't be afraid, take that first step. I mean, remember just a couple of slides ago, we were talking about love telling us to take the plunge. Yeah, take the plunge, okay? Take the first step from a universe's point of view, and from what I think this rule is saying from like, you know, the 40 rules point of view as well. But from the universe's point of view, what it's saying is, if you take the first step, how will help you along with the other steps, okay? That's why it's saying, fret not where the road will take you, okay? Instead, concentrate on the first step. And consider this: if you take the first step, and then consider the next step, okay, then that is the first step as well. So we're always taking the first step, you know, from a point of view, we can take it from a point of view of that, is that we're always taking the first step. So from that point of view, you know, take step one, and then take step one again, and then take step one again, you know, and you're moving along the road. And don't be concerned with where it will take you. Again, we've looked at it and seen that before as well, from a sense of, you know, don't be concerned how you get to the outcome. That's not in your hands, you know, that's in the universe's hands. It will get you to the outcome. The crescent moon will become full. Don't be worried about how it's going to get full. Just have that patience in that sense, you know, that it will. And in this sense, you know, just take the steps. Okay, so here's an interesting one. Again, this one kind of like, you know, rule number 21, it talks about when a true lover of God goes into a tavern, again, goes on a journey, that tavern becomes his chamber of prayer. That journey becomes his chamber of prayer. One of the ways that I translate that is like that. So when a true lover of God goes on a journey, that journey becomes his chamber of prayer. Yeah, so that is your kind of like, you know, being a delegate again of God on earth. And I think that's a nice way to see that. And we'll look at actually that same rule again, 21, later on. But in that sense, it's a really nice rule, I think, to look at this journey itself, the very journey itself, as being something, you know, something of a prayer. Okay, that's your chamber of prayer. It's what you're here to do. You're here to go on that journey, as well as being part of being a delegate of God on earth, if you like, is to go on that journey as well. I think that's an important one. So again, true lover of God. Yeah, that's an interesting, a true lover of God. Let's transpose the word God with some other things. A true lover of the universe, a true lover of love, a true lover of spirit, a true lover of the heart. Yeah. See how like we can take the words out and put in other words from when we were talking about the understanding, kind of deeper understanding of things. Yeah, we can take that word God out and put in, you know, the universe, love, the heart, spirit, soul, nature, you know, a true lover of nature. You know, whichever word we put in there, it works quite well. Just wanted to mention that. Let's get on. So here's another one, change. Okay, this is what we're kind of really averse to, isn't it? This is what it's all about. Even when we're going on a journey, whether that journey is like a kind of like something where we're thinking, okay, if I fail, you know, that's going to be really bad. Or even if I succeed, it's going to be really bad, because if I succeed, then I'll have to change. So I'm averse to succeeding at something that I do, in case, you know, that that will mean that I have to change. But here again, we get lots of warnings. The whole kind of notion of these rules is that, you know, you're going to change. Okay, and not only are you going to change, but you're going to anticipate change. You're going to do things in your life to cause change as well, right? So you're actively going to be promoting change in your life. Not only that, but the journey that you're on will change you. Okay, so again, warning signs. Okay, this is going to change me. So when I change, let's not be surprised about that. One of the aspects here that I want to talk about, rule number 18, beautiful. If you want to change the ways others treat you, you should first change the way you treat yourself. Makes sense, doesn't it? Probably every single spiritual and personal development teacher in the entire world has kind of said that, you know, if you want to change the world, change yourself. I think Gandhi said that, didn't he? You know, and it's very, very true. It's almost a sense that kind of, I wear sort of like spectacles, and one of the ways that I describe it to audiences is to say, you know what, the dirt isn't on the people that are around you. You keep telling them that they're dirty. The dirt is on the spectacles, and if you clean those, then you'll be able to see a world that is a lot different, you know. And one of the rules, again, it talks about, you know, cleaning your heart, you know, like this notion of cleaning your inner self and working on your heart and working on self-love to be able to clean that heart open. And when you clean that heart, then you see the world is different. Okay, and I think rule number 18 is saying that in a different way. This is that, you know, change the way that you treat yourself, and the world will change. You know, the people in the world will change. And second, rule number 13, which I've kind of like mentioned many times already, try not to resist the changes which come your way. Instead, let life live through you. Okay, 40 rules of love, you're going to change. Okay, you've read them now, you've kind of going through them with me on the Facebook group, and you've kind of read the book. Just knowing about them and having them sit somewhere in your subconscious is like settled, the seeds have settled in there, and they'll start to grow, and you'll come across it again, and you'll come across it again, because this is what your heart wants. And the most powerful thing in this universe is your heart. Okay, yeah, doesn't matter how much you've covered it up, doesn't matter how much you've dented it with all of the kind of self-abuse that you might have gone through, wherever it is, that heart there is still the strongest thing. The heart itself, in my opinion, can't be hurt. You know, what you end up doing is you're hurting yourself, you're not hurting your heart. You know, even though you direct things at you, you can't hurt your heart. And that's something that I'll bring up in one of the other slides later on. You know, the perfection of your heart, if you like. But what rule number 13 says is, you know, try not to resist the changes. Indeed, don't resist the changes, you know, welcome the changes. Again, rule number 11 talks about the quest for love changes us. Again, all of this notion that you're going to change, warning signs, right? Well, the rules telling, they're not rules, they're warning signs to tell you that you're going to be changing. And, you know, be aware of that, be prepped for that, okay? Rule number 28 is a really good one. And again, you know, spiritual masters, teachers, and that kind of thing, I've been saying it for eons. Put the past and future out of your mind and remain within the present moment. Yeah, live in the now. You have only the now. You can only do things in the now. You can't change the past, and the future is uncertain. I think there's a rule that kind of talks about it in that way as well. So live in this present moment. You know, this is the moment that matters. And in this moment, you can find everything. Okay, that's what that rule is talking about. And again, in this moment you change. You can't change the past, you can't change the future. You can only change things in this present moment, which is why it's under this theme of change, if you like. Rule number 29, people have often found this one a little bit difficult to appreciate and understand. Your destiny is the level where you play your tune. You know, and one of the aspects that we kind of is quite popular these days is that, you know, the universe is doing everything to me. I'm not doing anything. I kind of like am just a leaf being blown in the wind of the fate of the universe. And, you know, whatever happens, it happens for a reason, which is quite possibly true, but we can't prove it. Right, but from an aspect of like, you know, oh, that's nothing to do with me, I can't change anything, this is the life that I've been given, this is kind of like, you know, the past that I'm building my life on at the moment, so what can I do about that? Right, I'm given rule number 28 and 29 there. What rule number 29 is saying is that no, you have a hand in that. Yeah, you might have been given like a particular instrument and said, okay, you know, for your life, this is the instrument that you've got, a guitar. Okay, you've been given a guitar and that's it. That's your entire life, is you walking around with this guitar. And you think, okay, but I can play the tune. Nobody has, like, you know, there's no enforcement of the tune that I play, you know, or with this guitar. And that, I think, is where the aspect of destiny comes into our lives, is that, yeah, there are certain things, you know, you've been made a human being, you can't change that, you know, that's a given. But given the fact that you're a human being, there are various tunes you can play with your life. Okay, there are various things. There's a million different types of careers that you can pursue. There's a million different ways that you can, you know, go into the world and be impactful in the world. Okay, and that's what it's saying. You know, you can play you've got the ability to play your tune. Don't give that up as well to the, you know, to the hands of fate and to the hands of the wind, if you like, and say, you know what, there's nothing I can do. It's beyond me. In fact, many of the rules talk about the fact that you have that power to be able to do that. And we'll look at that in a couple of slides as well. So destiny is an important part, and destiny, again, is something that is a journey, is something that is a journey of change as well, and a change in you and a change in your environment as well. So that's kind of like the change thing, something that, you know, probably should be, you know, 40 rules of change is not a bad title for the book as well, because, you know, that's what these aspects of these rules are bringing you. They're bringing change into your life, and that change is being directed by, or has a fragrance of love, if you like, which is kind of like the whole theme of the 40 rules. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is an interesting one because, you know, love can only be perfected in pain. You know, only love will purify your heart. You know, there's like one man's pain will hurt us. There's various rules that this notion of pain, and we love it, don't we? Because like we've kind of all suffered pain in our lives in connection with the word love. Now, first of all, let's just look at it from one aspect, and then we'll come another one. But let's look at it from the aspects of what we talked about before, that when we talk about love in terms of the 40 rules, predominantly it's about loving yourself. Okay, so the notion then becomes like, well, how can loving myself be painful? How can that only be perfected in pain? You know, what is the pain involved in that? And then just to kind of like say it here as well, but a lot of us, and certainly myself included, right, have suffered a tremendous amount of pain from loving other people, right? Okay, you know, our partners, our ex-partners, and so on, right? You know, there's that kind of like pain is the one that we associate this, you know, love and pain aspect to. And even from friends, you know, anybody that we've kind of loved or have this really strong relationship, if something goes awry, you know, if some trust breaks or something happens in that, then, you know, we feel this pain, and that then shuts us down. You know, it shuts us down from loving other people, because, you know, it's like a burning stove. If you touch it, you feel pain and think, I'm not going to touch that kind of stove again. They're like, you know, very painful. And so you get this emotional pain from these aspects and these experiences in our lives. But first of all, let's go back to the other one, where loving yourself. How can that be painful? Now, an interesting aspect, I'm bringing one of the other quotes from Rumi, and I think one of the 40 rules as well kind of mentions this in a slightly different way. And what Rumi says was that, you know, if you're afraid of the rub, you know, the kind of rub of life, then how will you become polished? Okay, now I kind of translate that a different way. And what I kind of think of it is that, you know, if you're afraid of the rub, you know, the rub thing, then it's not so much that your heart is getting polished. You know, how will you become polished? What it's doing is that rub moves you away from people. Okay, so we've got this life, and the life that we lead and the life that we have, and then we've got, you know, somewhere we've got this heart and we've got this self-love, right? Okay, which is far away from, you know, people that love things, you know, people that love material things, people that love other people, and so on. It's far away from that. And so when we kind of like moving into the notion of loving yourself, then there's a certain amount of pain and a certain amount of loneliness that you're gonna go through to pull yourself away from that world. Yeah, the world that we see around us, the everyday world. Okay, the world that Rumi doesn't talk about, you know, that other world. So when you're pulling away from that world, that's going to cause you pain, and it's going to cause you loneliness. Remember, one of the other rules talked about, you know, like loneliness and being alone and so on. Yeah, when you move away from that, you're going to get that sense of that. And again, this is kind of like a warning. If you're going to go on a path of love, then it's going to be painful. So you're going to expect that. And so it's not going to be a surprise when it happens. But my personal belief is, because people kind of like, because they've been through experiences of pain from loving people, okay, and, you know, something's gone wrong and they feel that pain and love have become associated together. And to me, personally, I mean, you know, you don't have to hold this kind of view of it, but for me personally, what I feel that is that actually, you know, the pain that you feel when you're going on a journey of love is that you have to leave some other things behind. Okay, and it's leaving those things behind, and the loneliness, and kind of like, you know, the stretch and snap of that, you know, of leaving stuff behind. I think that is the pain that you suffer from. If you didn't have that, for instance, let's say that, you know, for some reason you're a hermit or something living out in the mountains, and you don't have this kind of relationship with other people, relationship with the world, and so on. You don't have that because you live in a cave in a mountain on your own, and then suddenly somebody gives you the 40 rules, and you kind of start reading these and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to go on a journey of love. And you go on a journey of love, then it's not going to be painful, because why would it? Where would the pain come from? Okay, because it's the pain, as I said, in my view, it comes from the leaving behind of other things and leaving behind of that world to some extent, and that is the pain. So, you know, and that is, you know, it says love can only be perfected in pain. That perfection comes through that leaving, that rub that Rumi talked about. Is that leaving. If you're afraid to leave the world, how will you discover your heart? Because your heart isn't necessarily in the world. Once you've discovered your heart, right, then we look at that delegate of God on earth. Yeah, if you're a delegate of your heart on earth, okay, so but you got to find that thing first. You got to figure out what that is and find it, and we'll look at that, you know, in a little bit later on. But that's an interesting aspect of it, is that, you know, for me anyway, is that this pain and love thing, pain is not to do with love and the heart, it's to do with what you'll leave behind. So hopefully kind of that makes sense. And, you know, again, you don't have to agree with that, but then that's just my view of it. So again, only love will purify your heart, which kind of like, obviously, really, rule number 16 makes real sense, is that, you know, love is a heart-centered thing. And so, you know, the practice of that self-love, the practice of loving yourself will purify your heart. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And here's the thing, here's then like how that going into yourself and loving yourself and then pushing that outwards, you know, because every time we hate and envy or fight someone, we tumble straight into the fires of hell. Okay, and the other side of that is every time we kind of love people, we fall into the fire, we fall into the, not the fires, but we fall into the garden of heaven, if you like, right? So that's that aspect of it. Okay, hate, envy, and fighting, you know, being angry and stuff, we're falling into the fires of hell. Again, it's a warning. If you want to avoid the fires of hell, don't hate and don't be envious and don't fight people. You know, there's a warning sign. And an aspect again of this notion of oneness comes in rule number 26, is that one man's pain will hurt us all. Okay, and that's an interesting aspect, because it kind of like it's that spiritual aspect of that you are me and I am you. So if you're in pain, then I am in pain, and then if you're hurt and I'm hurt, you know, and that I think is one of the aspects that's trying to bring that out here in rule number 26. Rule number 4, fascinating. Love can effortlessly reduce itself to rubble, but treasures are hidden among the ruins. And I think this again is talking about reduction. And I think one of the aspects of that reduction is it reduces the world. You know, our kind of relationships in the world, and that the way that we kind of currently behave in the world, pre the rules, if you like, and that behavior, and it reduces that. And then within those, you know, it's kind of like, often like have conversations with people over that, you know, and they kind of might say that my world has fallen apart and I'm trying to rebuild it. And I kind of like think of that and think, hey, no, don't try to rebuild the world that you had, because, you know, it fell apart for a reason. Rebuild another one. Look for the treasures in the ruins, okay, and rebuild another one. Because what we've done, sort of like from a visual perspective, is around our heart, and which also contains our love, if you like, we've built the world, okay, the world as we currently see it, okay. And so when that is reduced to rubble, then underneath in the ruins of that rubble is love and is our heart. So let's get that, you know, and kind of like either find it, which is kind of what the rules are talking about. But if, you know, a person's life, or if you feel that your life is falling apart in some sense, right, don't try to rebuild your life. Look for the treasures among those ruins, okay, and bring those out and build your life on those treasures, okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of sense of things in a bit. That's pain. Let's move on. So many of the rules talk about this universe and the notion of the universe and God and so on. And I want to bring that in as one of these meta themes as well. Like rule number one, right at the outset, like how we see God is a direct reflection of how we see ourselves. How we see the universe is a direct reflection of how we see ourselves. How we see other people, which is the universe, is a direct reflection of how we see ourselves. Yeah, how we see our heart, you know, is a direct reflection. If we don't look at ourselves and see ourselves as a perfect being, you know, people talk about imperfections and so on, but look at your heart and see that as a perfect heart, okay, then that's going to be a reflection of how we see the world, right? If I see my heart as being imperfect, then I'll see the world as being imperfect. And we've seen that in one of the other rules. So that's an important aspect to think of it, in the sense that, you know, if we translate God and with these other worlds like universe, people, the world, and so on, then that sentence brings more meaning to it. You know, how we see the universe is a direct reflection of how we see ourselves. So if you see the universe as filled with threats and filled with lack of abundance and filled with, you know, dangerous things, then, you know, there's something inside of us that's seeing that, you know, that's how we see ourselves, which is what that is saying, which is what another rule said as well, about the same kind of thing. If, you know, if you want to change the world, change yourself, right? And that's kind of the reverse of that. How you're seeing the world is how you're seeing yourself. So, you know, you need to be able to work on yourself. And to be honest, and again, you know, from the schools of personal development and coaching and so on, the only thing that you can really work on is yourself, okay. And given that that's the only thing that you can work on, then, you know, this is the place where it is. If you want to change the world, then you've got to work on yourself, and that's the only place. If you try to change other people, again, look at that analogy of the spectacles with like muck on them, okay. If you're thinking the muck's out there somewhere and you're trying to clean that up, it will never work until you actually get to yourself and clean it off yourself, and then you can see the world as it is. Important aspect. The second one, rule number 17. Okay, the whole universe is contained within a single human being, you. Okay, the whole universe. Okay, not like kind of part of the universe, not like, it's not saying that you're a part of the universe. It's saying this kind of like hologramic sense, you know, holographic sense of notion of that the whole universe is within you. Okay, which then comes to that other notion of, we talked about how can we do things in the world, what is impossible for us anymore, and this kind of like, you know, takes this notion of what's impossible and really makes it huge, or rather what's possible and makes it huge, and shrinks down the impossible. You know, what can't you do? Well, if the whole universe is contained within you, what can't you do? Okay, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Right? What can't you do? So that is very beautiful from a point of view of like personal development, which is what I kind of like, you know, teach out there and practice. It's just like, if the whole universe is contained within you, what can't you do? You know, what goals can't you achieve? Surely, if the whole universe is contained within you, you can go on a journey to your heart Yeah, go on a journey of self-love. Surely you can do that. Surely the whole universe is up to a task such as that, right? So that's an interesting aspect to consider there. Okay. The universe is one being, and everything and everyone is connected through an invisible web of stories. I just wanted to include that because one of the things I really love about their rules is this one, rule number 26, and that, you know, everything and everyone is interconnected through an invisible web of stories. I love it. I don't know where Elif Shafak came up with that, you know, but that invisible web of stories, beautiful. I love it. And to be honest with you, I only really included that, you know, in this slide, is just to say, just to appreciate from a personal perspective of, like, you know, the words that came out there with invisible web of stories. I use that all of the time now. It's beautiful. I love it. So rule number 32, nothing should stand between you and God. Okay, now again, let's look at this interesting aspect, okay, because let's put other things in place of that word God. Nothing should stand between you and love. Nothing should stand between you and the universe. Nothing should stand between you and nature. Important, right? Don't let anything get in between there. I think what this is talking about, and from what I remember in the books, is that we have, and indeed this quote, I believe, the surrounding other parts of it, not an imam, not a synagogue, not a church, nothing should be between you and God, you know, and nothing should be between you and your heart, right? I think that's the same thing. Nothing should be between you and love. There should be no separation between you and love. You are love. Okay, so you can't be any separation. Any separation, as kind of like some religious thoughts kind of go into, any separation of that is an illusion. Okay, the separation between love and you is an illusion. Okay, and I think some of the aspects of rule number 32 is talking about that. So again, this universal notion, love the fact that the universe is contained within you, kind of like gives us a whole raft of things that potentially were impossible become possible now, because the whole universe is within us, is contained within us. Okay, and you know, that lovely web of stories is interconnected, not just like some kind of energy connection between us all, which I kind of believe as well, but this invisible web of stories. Yeah, because as you're walking down the road and you smile at somebody, right, you don't know how that person's life has changed because of that. Okay, we don't know. This was one of the exciting things about kind of this universe and this life, is that, you know, we go out there into the world and our small touch makes a huge wave. Okay, and in kind of sciencey terms, they call it the butterfly effect, where, you know, a butterfly flaps its wings in one area of the world and it causes a tornado in the other area of the world. Well, in one area of the world, you've kind of like, you know, gone into your heart and find certain things. And one of those things might be, you know, to smile at a person that you meet in the street. Okay, because you've discovered it and you've kind of set off and said, hey, you know what, here's one of the ways that I'm going to treat the people that I meet. I'm going to smile at them. Okay, and that smile then translates to who knows what at the end of the day for that person and for the people that person meets. Okay, the butterfly effect, beautiful, love it. So this whole universe, with lovely, again, you know, this invisible web of stories, beautiful. Okay, so that's kind of like, we've gone through these themes here. Let's let me go back to this slide over here. We've kind of gone through these meta themes of uniqueness and, you know, having patience. It's so important for me. So important, this notion of like, be patient, you know, it's going to work out. Everything has worked out. Okay, you've been through situations in your life, okay, where things are thought, how the hell is this going to work out? And yet it's worked out because you're here. Yeah. So what we forget is those, you know, we think that every kind of hurricane. I remember a little story here, if you will. I remember many years ago going to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and you know, the tower, actually, when you get to the top, you can feel it like moving in the wind, right? And I thought to myself, oh my God, you know, it stood here for like, I don't know, 80 years or 100 years, and now that I've gone on top of it, it's going to fall over. You know, it's not, right? And this is what it is for our lives. We forget the fact that troubles have come into our life, you know, like issues have been raised in our life, you know, we've been hurt by the love that we've kind of like, you know, experienced in our life. So, you know, that's it. That's what's going to happen the next time. It's going to, each event in our lives is unique. Each person is unique. Okay, so that's going to be different, because they're unique, you're unique, okay? And then, you know, we've got through it as well. So have the notion, have the remembrance of that we've got through these things. Have the remembrance that the universe is inside of you. Have the remembrance that, you know, everything is a journey. There is no static. You know, the universe will not allow static. You know, the next theme there is change, because the universe will not allow static. Okay, and I think the pain aspect of it is, it's not a pain of love. For me, it's the pain of leaving other things behind. That's what it is. It's like the notion that, you know, there's these things, people that I need to leave behind, or some friends that I might need to leave behind, or a lover that I might need to leave behind. Okay, and it's that pain. It is not the pain of love itself. And then this notion that we are the universe within us, and, you know, how much can you do when the universe is in you? Okay, so just these meta themes here, bringing them all together and kind of creating this web of stories around your life, right? Using these in and pulling them out of the rules, which are kind of longer text and so on. Okay, so just want to move on now and actually talk about a little bit about the 40 Rules of Love, the book. And because you know, I mean, I described it, and I think I put this on the Facebook group as well, is that it's a story of love about a story of love about a story of love. Okay, and there's, like, you know, Ella, the main character, and I just want to warn you here, so, you know, if you're watching this and you haven't read the book, then, you know, skip ahead a little bit to so that to avoid any spoilers here. But it's the story about Ella who falls in love with that guy Aziz, right? Then it's a story about Shams and Rumi, Shams of Tabriz and Rumi, and the love between them. And then it's a story about the 40 Rules of Love. Okay, and there are other aspects, obviously, that bring all of that together, but that's how I describe it: a story about love, about love, about love, encapsulated. But and we've kind of like pulled out these 40 rules, and we just focuses on 40 rules. But what I want to do as well is look at the book itself, you know, Elif Shafak's book, The 40 Rules of Love. And the way that I want to look at it is through some relationships and the people that are in it. So we're introduced to Ella at the beginning of the story, and her family and her situation. And then, you know, she, from a point of view of the 40 rules, we see her life change. She takes the courage, and, you know, jumps into, you know, one of the rules says take the plunge, and so she takes the plunge. Okay, now one of the aspects that I want to mention about a plunge is it doesn't have to be like, you know, literally in 1 second jump in. You know, Ella doesn't kind of like read and say, right, I'm going to jump straight into that. She considers and she takes time and she moves into that. But still, it's a move, it's a journey into that. And so, you know, plunge doesn't necessarily mean don't consider things. Consider them. Absolutely, you should consider them. But when you're ready, go for it. Okay, that's what I think that plunge means. It means, you know, consider them. Yeah, absolutely. And then go for it, you know, just take that jump and go. So then you've got the story of Ella and Aziz as well, and their kind of relationship that blossoms throughout the book, you know. And I think kind of Aziz, I think in the book as well, it kind of mentions that, you know, maybe he has some reflections of Shams within him. And to be honest with you, I mean, when I was reading, I don't know whether you identified with anybody in the book, but for a predominant amount of time, I identified with Shams. You know, I don't know whether that's kind of egotistical or whatever to say that, but I did. I kind of looked at my life, and I looked at like the life of Shams, and I thought, hey, you know what, this guy's like me. I like it a lot. And one of the reasons the book really drew me, you know, however, I have to say, as the book went through it, I kind of like started to see some differences between me and Shams as well. So it wasn't that, you know, it was like kind of the exact kind of like duplicate of me. I did start to see some differences, and some of the things that actually I liked within myself that I kind of thought, not too sure about in Shams, which is interesting, right? We'll move on to that. So there was like this story about Shams and Rumi, which is fascinating. Okay, this fascinating love between two people, between, like, you know, a teacher and a student, between a mirror and a mirror, which is kind of one of the rules talks about finding your mirror. You know, like, and Rumi found his mirror in Shams, and Shams in Rumi. And then there's the story of Rumi and his family. And then there's kind of like this notion of Shams and others as well. But what I want to do here is look at some of the aspects of the 40 rules and ask the question, the people, particularly Shams, who is the inventor or originator of the 40 rules, you know, are they following the 40 rules themselves, and how are they demonstrating the 40 rules within the book? And certainly from a point of view of Ella, I can see how how the rules kind of like implemented or were lived out of the story of her life within the book. You know, she kind of like, you know, is dissatisfied with the current state of her life, and she kind of like opens herself up, you know, opens herself up to love, which is what takes a journey within, you know, all of those kind of aspects we can see within Ella's life, and has a relationship kind of built. And then even at the end of the book, and again, spoilers here, sorry guys, but even at the end of the book, you know, when she turns another chapter and she moves to Holland, again, you see that, you know, that next level, you know, that maybe like, you know, we were talking about 40 levels before, maybe it's that next level when she again, you know, the rules of love are implemented again in her life. So that's another area that, you know, that kind of expansion of Ella's world and Ella's life story kind of happens, and how it reflects on several of the, you know, of the rules. The universe, the whole universe is within a single human being. Certainly some of that strength was needed for Ella to take the journey that she went on. And then there's like Shams and Rumi. And there's an interesting aspect of how Rumi's life changed because of Shams's influence on him. And, you know, again, doing things like burning his books and, you know, telling him to go to a tavern. And again, you know, you see that notion of whatever, it's not a tavern, it's who goes there. Remember that rule that says, you know, it's not where, it's who you are that matters. You know, if you're a Sufi and you go into a tavern, that becomes your place of prayer. And so Shams was kind of demonstrating perhaps to Rumi in that sense is, you know, it doesn't matter where you go, it's what's in your heart that counts. It's who's going there that counts. You know, it's not the place that you go to that matters. Okay, and that interesting aspect here. But certainly here's something that really fascinated me. And it was like, you know, the relationship between Rumi and his family, and between Shams and others. Because you got to consider, right, that Shams, you consider that these are his 40 rules, right? And he was a follower of the 40 rules, but at the end of the book, you know, or even at the beginning of the book, right, he was killed. Okay, potentially he was killed. And potentially one of the people that was involved in that murder was one of Rumi's family, his son. And you have to consider then that, hang on a sec, if I start to implement these 40 rules, are people going to come around and kill me? You know, because, you know, that's the story says. He's the inventor of these rules, or a follower of these rules at least. And given that he's a follower, his fate, you know, doesn't really kind of like lead one to think that actually I want to follow these rules as well and end up with a similar kind of fate. So that's an interesting aspect, because what I feel the differences between perhaps like us and Shams is that Shams is the shower in the world of these things. You know, that's, he looked into his heart and he found something that, you know, I have to go out into the world and demonstrate to the world and tell the world and show the world and so on. Although maybe not in a kind of, you know, on a platform kind of way, but on a living your life kind of way. And what happened when that occurred is that other people started to feel the rub. Remember, if you, the rub is where you're being pulled away from your kind of the comfy world that you're living in into another world, and they felt that pull into the other world, and being threatened by that pull, they reacted accordingly. When people threaten, they kind of like, you know, kill whatever's trying to threaten them. And so potentially perhaps that is the aspect that Elif Shafak was trying to tell in this story. And indeed, I think that a lot of the story itself, although it's a novel, I think a lot of the story is kind of like what actually happened. So from a point of view, again, of Rumi and his family and the kind of disassociations that they had with his family, that notion of, you know, the fact that, okay, you've got your family over here and I've got this new relationship with this new guy, Shams, over here, and I'm, you know, kind of like disrespecting my family almost in one sense. And don't want to be critical of this, but, you know, because this is a stage where Rumi was learning himself. He was going through his own rub. So perhaps, you know, we can excuse him in that sense. But it's an interesting aspect if you read the book and look at the relationships between them and ask yourself that important question of, these guys and the 40 rules of love, how were they applying it into their own situations and into their own lives, and whether they were applying these rules, and what the impact was of those. Because you see some of the relationship between, for instance, Rumi and his wife. He wasn't allowed to clean his books, and yet Shams was there burning them, right? So you're kind of creating this atmosphere there. And I wonder whether, that atmosphere was contrived because of the novel and something that the novel wanted to present, or whether, that was actually there. And you're thinking, well, how many rules was Rumi breaking when he was like treating his wife and children in a certain way, and was that to demonstrate the rules themselves? So that's an important aspect. But certainly, I have questions about some of the story aspects of 40 Rules of Love, and probably not much about the actual rules themselves, because I think they pretty much stand on their own. So that's an interesting kind of look at 40 Rules of Love. So let's look at a lover of love, which is eventually what we are. At least we're on a journey of that. And I think it has to begin with, looking at these 40 rules, I think it has to begin with, who are you? Figuring that out. That's a journey. Who is the unique you? Who is the you that God breathed into? Okay, one of the rules talks about God breathing into us. Who are you? Stop and consider that. We can't go into the world without first having kind of figured that out to some extent. Even that is a journey, obviously, within. But we have to sit, and we have to sit in our solitude and figure out, who are you? What are you doing in this world? What are you a delegate of God for in this world? What is your purpose in life, if you like, as well? And a lot of people don't explore that. Okay, because this is just you. Remember, this is all about you, your solitude on your own. Yeah, who are you? Go deeply into that question. Look at that, because without answering that question, how can you then bring that to the world? Okay, and again, one of the things that, again, a warning sign, one of the things that will happen when you explore this who are you, is you leave some of the other people behind. Perhaps just for a while, just so that you can figure out this notion of who are you. Okay, you find that out, you figure out this notion of who are you. Okay, and then you move to the next stage, right? And one of the things that I have to ask you is, do you love you? Okay, it's an important question. Do you love you? And do you really? And then ask yourself, how is that demonstrated? Yeah, and then if you're not, ask yourself, how can you love you? Okay, and one of the ways that kind of I see this is that in a similar fashion to when you fall in love with somebody else. Okay, imagine you fall in love with somebody else. Okay, you probably have fallen in love with somebody else at some point. Okay, and what would you do to that person? Anything. You would do all that is good for that person and try to avoid all that is bad for that person, right? Do that for yourself. Okay, how is that demonstrated? Very easily. People kind of have this, oh, how can I practice self-love? And it's easy. Practice the loving somebody else. Take all of the examples of that and practice them towards yourself. Okay, so if you're doing something towards yourself, for instance, for example, you're doing something towards yourself that isn't healthy, you wouldn't want to do that to somebody else. The person you love, you want to kind of go and say, hey, you know what, eat these huge burgers and eat these, and don't exercise, and don't do all of these bad things, right? Yeah, you kind of wouldn't want to push that onto a person that you love. So don't push them onto yourself. Yeah, how can they love you? Do nice things for yourself. Okay, that's one of the things to start off with. And then finally, looking at that, is how do you express love for people or the universe or God? How do you become a delegate of God on earth, or a delegate of the universe, or a delegate of love on earth? Okay, and again, you have to go through the other two stages. You have to go through, who are you, figuring all of that out. Okay, because it's no good manufacturing or kind of having this notion of you that isn't really you, the current notion of who you are, and expressing that. Okay, you have to go inside of yourself, take that journey inside of yourself, and find that love inside of yourself, and find that unique you inside of yourself, right? Okay, then practice that with yourself. Okay, so love yourself. One of the things that when you do kind of fall into a relationship with somebody else is that you want to find out what they like and don't like, so that you can then provide some of that, give them some of that, because you love them, right? So do that, find out what you like and don't like, find out who you are, yeah, and then give yourself some of that. Okay, that's how you love yourself, one of the ways. And once you've done that, then going through that love, express that love for other people. Okay, remember, we've talked about mirrors, we've talked about, what you see outside is what is inside, and so on. What's inside is outside. We've seen that throughout all of the rules here. So if you find love inside, then you start expressing it outside to the people as well. And then you'll find it outside in the world as well. Okay, so that's kind of that aspect of how do you express love for people or the universe or whatever, in the world. How do you become a delegate of love on earth, rather than a God? How do you become a delegate of love? Okay, so just want to kind of move on and see if you guys have got any questions over here. I'm just going to look over here to the panel. So go ahead and type away. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in there, and I will answer them as best I can. So let me move on to the question slide. Here we go, over here. Lover of love, your questions. Yeah, well, I can see. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the journey within is a difficult one, and one of the things to practice with that journey is patience. Okay, there's a question there about that. One of the things to practice there is patience. Okay, because again, we've been given these kind of hints and tips and warning signs through these. Practice and be patient with it, and it's not going to work out the first time, but it'll work out the second time, work out the third time. And certainly this notion of love has to go in through you out to somebody else. If you can't give what you haven't got, so if you love yourself first, then you're capable of loving other people. And I think one of the rules actually talks about that as well. So is there any more questions there? Yeah, like God, the universe and everything. I think some people have this kind of like backstory of God, and they don't like the word God, and I think that's understandable. But again, when right at the beginning there was this notion that you can transmute that word God and translate it into love, or you can translate it into the spirit or the universe or nature. I think all of those words work quite well within the subject of that. I don't think this is kind of Sufism these days, certainly, although it might have a history within a religious context of Islam. Certainly these days, Sufism is by no means kind of like tied to any religion. It's a religious, if that's a word. No? Okay, I think that's it for questions. So I hope you've enjoyed yourself here. I just want to move on to the last slide, which is, again, this is like, don't watch this slide if you don't want to know the last rules, because this is the 40th rule. So I'll give you like a couple of ticks to switch the video off here, because I'm going to reveal the final 40th rule and probably read it out as well. So just switch off the video if you get to this stage and you don't want to know. Rule 40 then. A life without love is of no account. Don't ask yourself what kind of love you should seek, spiritual or material, divine or mundane, Eastern or Western. Divisions only lead to more divisions. Love has no labels, no definitions. It is what it is, pure and simple. Love is the water of life, and a lover is a soul of fire. The universe turns differently when fire loves water. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you again in 40 Rules of Love on the Facebook group. Bye for now.